The name of this panel is DVT and the Future of Ethereum Validators. So we have some lovely panelists here. We'll all go around and introduce ourselves. I guess I'll go first. My name is Jillian Freedman. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Ether Capital. Ether Capital is a Toronto-based public company. We're one of the largest ETH stakers on the public markets. We're staking about 80% of our 46,000 ETH treasury. And we care deeply about a distributed and diversified Ethereum staking landscape. So on to you, Will.
Hi, everyone. I'm Will. I'm a contributor to the Lido DAO in the non-work stream. Very involved in all the work we're doing in DVT, so excited for this panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brett Lee. I lead growth at Opal Labs. We are an R&D team focused on building infrastructure tech for Ethereum and other proof-of-stake blockchains. Currently working on distributed validator technology and taking that to Ethereum mainnet.
Cool. And I'm Clayton. I work at Figment and Figment Capital. We're an institutional-focused staking infrastructure provider. We also actively invest in the infrastructure layer on blockchain protocols.
Okay, so let's get started. The topic of this panel is DVT, which stands for Distributed Validator Technology. So our first question is, what is Distributed Validator Technology? And who wants to take a stab at answering that?
I'll go ahead and take
Excellent.
that. So DVT, Distributed Validator Technology, essentially is a tech primitive that allows a single validator to be split into multiple nodes. This can be 4 different machines, 7 machines, 10 machines. Each of these nodes can be run by the same operator, multiple operators. They can have the same client configurations, different client configurations. They can be located in the same geos or multiple geos. And the key value of this is to add multiple layers, but first is about resiliency of validators. Today, if you're running a validator on one machine, that machine goes down, guess what, you're offline, right? And the only way to add redundancy today is through what is called active-passive redundancy, which means you have a failover machine that has a full copy of the private key as a validator backup, and if your primary machine goes down, you spin up the second one. Now, there's a risk to that, because if both those machines are up at the same time, guess what? That's a slashing event, right? And so there's not a great way to run highly available, redundant validators today. Now, in addition to that, it creates a barrier to entry for a lot of solo at-home validators. And operators need to make sure they have great operations in order to become a solid validator. And so there's a barrier to entry for that. What DVT can do is to help solo validators as well now be able to spin up a node by themselves or with a group of friends, 4 people, 7 people, 10 people, and not have to, number one, have the full 32 ETH to run their own validator, but share that 32 ETH amongst a group of friends. And on top of that, even if, again, their living room machine goes down, as long as their friends' machines are still up, that entire validator is active and running. And so just to finish up this, this narrative here, we recently launched actually the first ever DV on Ethereum mainnet. Core team did it. All living rooms, 4 houses in 3 different countries, in Ireland, Estonia, and in Canada. And the distributed validator is performing at the top 1% of all validators on the network. So it goes to show that you can use this technology to make at-home validation much more accessible.
Thanks. So just zooming out a little bit and looking at like why is this important? Will, and anybody else that wants to add also, what role can DVT play in the decentralization, but like the overall resilience of Ethereum?
So I like to sort of think of this from the micro and the macro, and the micro being the individual validator level, flowing up to the macro, which is the overall Ethereum network. And so today you have a single validator that has an execution layer client, a consensus layer client, and DVT allows you to take both of those things, that single validator, split it across 4, 7, 10, and combine different combinations. On top of that, you might have a validator running out of someone's house in Canada. Now you can have a node in someone's house in Canada, an AWS data center in Europe, another house in Australia, and another house in Mongolia. So on top of this, you can combine different kinds of infrastructure types, so different hosting, different locations, different clients. While that happens at the single validator level, you've made this thing so much more resilient to single points of failure. Those risks become much less. And when you adopt this network-wide, the overall network becomes much, much more resilient.
So it also sounds like DVT is a gateway for smaller operators to get involved. I'm wondering, Clayton, if you have any insights in like, what is the role that like larger node operators like a Figment would play in the build out of DVT?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're someone that doesn't want to run your own infrastructure for compliance reasons or because you're not, just don't want to learn how to do it yourself, there is a single point of failure for any sort of client that you're using, or if you want to work with multiple providers, those providers themselves, are managing their infrastructure internally, maybe using proprietary sort of solutions. DVT allows you to work with multiple different node operators and allows you to, have a lot of visibility in how it's functioning. As a token holder wants to stake without managing their own infrastructure. I think also because it allows these validators to be more resilient, right? Like you are having higher effectiveness rating, higher rewards, less risk from a slashing perspective. It just on the adoption curve of whether being a node operator or a staker or someone that's interested in the idea of staking Ethereum just becomes a lot broader, down to the at-home, hobbyist Ethereum community, but like also to larger, asset managers, like actual institutions as opposed to, crypto institutions.
So something that comes to mind is Mev, and how does Mev work in a DVT world?
So in short, this is kind of in the research phase.
Okay.
The way we think about it is like they're both part of a new kind of burgeoning middleware layer in Ethereum. And it'll be really interesting to see how distributed validators, DVT technology, and Mev Boost, and other middlewares that will come up in the future kind of interact together. Yeah, so more to be seen, I think, and there's a lot of research to be done in how these different middlewares technologies start to fit together.
One thing I think that's interesting about the MEV topic in DVT, latency is such a huge problem for MEV, and it's like one of the potential issues for DVT. And so I think that's going to be, when we talk about adoption of DVT, probably one of the things that is a bit complicated as we configure setups, because even today the merge was 4 or 5 months ago, we still have problems with MEV boost. It's like some days with latency. So.
No, I agree, and I think that's definitely a consideration. So we're kind of in our second test net right now. It's called BIA. And one of the things we're focused on is making sure that the performance doesn't degrade even as you're distributing these validators. And so far, contrary to I think what a lot of people expected, we're actually seeing inclusion delays that are lower than what you would expect. So we'll continue to monitor that, but yeah, absolutely, performance, latency is a critical thing to maintain even as you start to decentralize and distribute these validators.
Is there a sweet spot of number of participants? In the example you said where you guys launched something on mainnet and you had 4 different friends running an OBOL setup. Is there what's the range of unique participants?
Yeah, so right now, the way we think about it, the ideal setups are 4, 7, or 10 participants. And the reason for that is it optimizes for the security of the cluster. When you have a 4-person node, you can have one node go down, and that cluster is still actively validating. When you have 7, you can have 5. When you have 10, you can have 7 active and still validating. Anything in between that, you still need to meet those thresholds, which means you need a higher percentage of the nodes to be active in order for that validator to be running. And so basically 4, 7, and 10 are the ideal setups that we've seen. We haven't really tested any more than 10 because you don't really need to. You could have a lot of validators running on these distributed clusters. But that's kind of what we've seen so far.
And I want to ask a question about liquid staking, but I have one follow-up question, which is, do you see the need for some sort of a independent community of unrelated people that would like pair up to actually run these things? And how does that look, and what is the future of that?
Yeah, so it's funny that you asked that. The first version of Obol is going to be kind of a trust model. And what do I mean by that? You kind of need to know who you're running your validator with, right? With that said, it doesn't have to be somebody like next to you. You can find this person wherever, right? And so we're running, again, our beta testnet right now, and we have over 900 clusters made with people around the world purely finding each other on a Discord channel. Like they literally said, I want to run a validator. Do you want to do it with me? Great, let's go, right? And sharing a little bit of my background.
It's like a validator dating app.
Exactly. So you can definitely do that. And in the future, in V2, we are looking at more trustless models where you can join and not know who your other partners are in the cluster and still be protected from bad behavior, Byzantine behavior, things like that.
But I also think DVT is one of the missing links for this sort of open marketplace for collecting stakers and node operators because of the preference associated with clients or geographic locations. That's not necessarily a necessity for someone that may be building a liquid staking protocol, but it is obviously something that gives people a wider variety of risk and reward appetite as well.
Will, I wanted to ask, what are some of the opportunities and challenges when it comes to liquid staking and DVT?
Yeah, so I'll try and contain my excitement because I think DVT on the liquid staking side, especially 2023, is going to be huge. Currently, Lido, I'll speak from Lido's perspective, we're running our second pilot on testnet with both Obol and SSV, which is the other sort of large DVT solution that exists today. Lido announced the V2 upgrade a couple weeks ago, and basically this allows for the modularization of the protocol. And what that really means is that we're going to allow different kinds of node operators to start participating in different ways. And DVT is going to be a core part of taking Lido from 29 Ethereum node operators today to hopefully 100 in the next 12 to 18 months, and very, very soon after, thousands. DVT allows basically us to combine solo stakers, community stakers, professional stakers like Figment, and create really resilient, decentralized clusters that allows Lido to, decentralize our node operator base to a huge extent. I think coordination is going to be one of the issues still in 2023. DKG, or distributed key generation, is something that we'd love to see in an ideal world. That still requires a fair bit of manual work. Like the golden dream, like years down the road, would be you have a solo staker, a community staker, professional staker, all ready to be allocated ETH, and DKG would happen asynchronously, and the cluster would basically spin up, and no one would touch it. I think we're still a few years away from that, but DVT is going to be huge for Lido and liquid staking in general this year.
Thank you, and I guess we're still very much in early-ish days of this, and so there's still a lot of questions. Clayton, I wanted to give you an opportunity to just add in anything that may have been missed in terms of how the staking community might evolve and what the impact of DVT will have on the staking community.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this from an adoption curve sort of perspective, and what came before it, to where if you think of proof of work versus proof of stake, adding a new validator to the Ethereum set is like adding a new miner to the Bitcoin network, and so solutions beforehand like Lido or MEV is just incentivizing more stake on the network. A solution like DVT actually makes that stake more valuable because of how efficient these nodes can become. So I think that's very interesting. Where it's it would hard to be gauge an actual number, but how much valuable the network would be in relation to how much Ethereum is currently staked on the network because of it operating that way, to where it's not just a benefit from a staker perspective anymore, it's a benefit to everyone that's interacting with the execution layer as well, which I think is highly interesting. I think DVT bleeds into restaking, which is another thing associated with being able to export the value of Ethereum security to other ecosystems. And that security is more valuable because of DVT, but it's definitely in the very, very early stages, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, super interesting, and I know we were talking about that before and how like DVT and restaking works, and it sounds like it's really like the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge. So a lot of questions remain to be answered. I see we only have a few minutes left, and maybe there are questions from the audience, but I wanted to put out this more like existential question, which is like, what in a world without DVT, can Ethereum remain credibly neutral? And what is the alternative if like no DVT dies on the vine, like knock on wood, like that won't happen, but like why is it so important? What happens to Ethereum without a DVT-like solution?
I mean, I think without, if you can't incentivize diversity within the validator set, the best solution on the market will have concentration, right? And so over time, without being able to merge everything together through something like distributed validator technology, you're going to have a centralization risk. Same with like mining pools on Bitcoin, same with mining pools on Ethereum, less than a few months ago at this point. And just concentration at the staking level as well, right? Like there probably would be a handful of actors that would be able to perform the function better than others, and the market will just move over to that. Same with any other market that exists on this planet.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think just without DVT, there's a lot more risk in the consensus of the network, whether it's centralization risk, whether it's slashing risk, whether it's offline risk. There's just a lot more risk without this primitive embedded into the protocol or into the network to kind of decentralize and to make the entire network more resilient. So I would sum it down to risk, higher risk.
Okay, well that's super interesting. I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience. If not, I can keep lobbing a couple at you guys.
Yeah, it's a great question. So actually, we launched the product called the Distributed Validator Launchpad, or DV Launchpad. Our head of product actually was the one that built the Ethereum or ETH2 Launchpad back in 2020, and it basically provides a user interface for you to go in, and then configure the cluster, and then run through the steps to be able to activate it. So that's how all of our testnet participants, at-home validators, are spinning up their clusters just through this UI interface. And it basically walks them through the entire process of spinning up a cluster. So you need to get your machine, set up the machine, and then run through this DV Launchpad process, and then you have a distributed validator set up at the end of it.
Any other questions? Okay. Anyone have any final words to add in the last 30 seconds?
I would just say I would like all of you to get involved one way or another. Like if you are a validator yourself, part of a professional entity, come talk to us. If you're a solo validator, I'd love for you to participate in testing the technology and getting it to mainnet. And then if you're just staking ETH, I think just to be more familiar with DVT is important, because it is an important security primitive, a security standard, if you will, that needs to be implemented into the network. So I think just getting more familiar with DVT is what I would ask. But yeah, happy to talk after this as well.
I'll throw in two quickly, but I think Lido will definitely be doing more rounds of testing with DVT, solo stakers, community stakers, other node operators. Please reach out. We'd love to have you join in our future pilots.
Figment will be using DVT as well. And also the importance of open source solutions like this that are universally accessible, not doubling efforts at every part of the stack where everyone has to build a proprietary solution is not the direction of this ecosystem moving forward. And so we're very excited to be working with both teams.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys. We're over time, but thanks for everybody here for listening.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll stick around if anybody wants to chat afterwards. Bye.